As World War II was about to break out, and the Nazis posed a significant threat to the entire European continent, Hawker Aircraft was pursuing a private venture to create the ultimate fighter, one that could face the imposing German Messerschmitts. At the time, Britain was reluctant to modernize its Air Force fleet, still relying heavily on the biplane. But aircraft developers were ready to kick off the era of the monoplane. The Hurricane then gloriously emerged, and it played a pivotal role during the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940. While the Supermarine Spitfire is usually credited with the victory, it was really the Hurricane that bore the brunt of the fight. As Winston Churchill would say in a speech offering a tribute to Royal Air Force pilots who bravely fought in a decisive battle, quote, "Never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few." Changing times. The Hawker Hurricane was conceived as early as 1933, at a time when monoplanes were considered not merely unorthodox but highly risky. Nevertheless, the revolutionary model was designed to be Britain's first modern monoplane fighter. During a period of serious disarmament within the Royal Air Force in the interwar years, it was especially challenging for monoplane models to make their way into the front line. With a less than effective fighting force of 13 aircraft squadrons, Fighter Command was desperate to strengthen its defenses, and the war hadn't even begun. Meanwhile, the Germans were upgrading their machinery. Uninhibited by the issues that made the British doubtful, Nazi Germany already counted with a superior monoplane fighter, the Messerschmitt Bf 109. But Sidney Cam, Hawker Aircraft's chief designer, had a vision and convinced Hawker to pursue the development of a new fighter as a private venture. Sir Peter Masefield, the assistant to the Minister for Aircraft Production, would later recall in an interview that, quote, "His objective was to build the world's best fighter all around, not just in any one particular, but in all respects. It had to be faster, it had to be easier to build, it had to have the best armament, and it had to be easy to fly." The Fury monoplane. When the Air Ministry formally sought to replace its old biplanes with modern fighters, Cam already had a completed design. He called it the Fury monoplane, as it was a modernized variation of the graceful Fury biplane. The new monoplane would be powered by the powerful and innovative Merlin V12 engine by Rolls-Royce, which would become the most successful aerial engine in the war. Cam even redesigned the airframe to accommodate this sophisticated machinery. The engine had a potent 1,030 horsepower, which amounted to a top speed of 340 miles per hour, making it the first Royal Air Force monoplane fighter to exceed 300 miles per hour. Its construction demanded strong materials that could withstand load requirements. Whereas its inner structure was devised with steel tubing, its classic silhouette was the result of a more conventional method. Wooden stringers and ribs contoured the airframe and supported its sleek curves. Moreover, its outer skin was fashioned in Irish linen and coated in cellulose dope for protection. Initially, the Hawker monoplane's armament consisted of two .303 caliber Vickers Mark V machine guns fitted in the fuselage, and another set of two .303 caliber Browning machine guns were mounted on the wings. Still, Air Vice Marshal Hugh "Stuffy" Dowding, who was responsible for the RAF's technical development, pondered that the armament wouldn't be enough. He therefore decided that no less than 8 machine guns would be necessary to destroy an enemy bomber, and 4 Browning machine guns were incorporated onto each wing, giving the aircraft a more destructive concentration of firepower. The final design for the Hurricane was radical, with unusual features for the time. These innovations included the enclosed cockpit and the retractable undercarriage, not to mention the inbound machine guns in the wing. While all of these aspects would become a standard for World War II-era aircraft, several authorities, used to open cockpits and fixed wheels, insisted that monoplanes would always be outclassed by the biplanes. Still, had the Royal Air Force not modernized its fleet before the summer of 1940, Britain would have certainly fallen to the hands of the Nazis, just as Poland, France, and most of continental Europe did. Ready to serve. The government finally allowed the project to advance, as it was persuaded to pay for a prototype. The Hurricane then flew for the first time in November of 1935, although its name was not officially approved until June of 1936. Despite its impressive performance, the Air Ministry still had doubts about such an unusual aircraft. Consequently, the first order of 600 examples was not issued until 7 months after its maiden flight. The No. 111 Squadron was the first RAF unit to receive the Hawker Hurricane in late 1937. And realizing that the upcoming conflict was nigh, the Air Ministry boosted production during the following year. By the time the war broke out, roughly 500 Hurricanes were ready to serve, allocated in 18 squadrons. By June of 1940, Germany had occupied northern France, and England was soon to follow. Still, Hitler knew he would first have to dismantle the RAF before an invasion could even commence. The German forces were battle-hardened and motivated by their last victories against other European countries, and sent 2,000 aircraft across the Channel between bombers and fighters. Meanwhile, Britain would have to face them on its own. In mid-July, the Luftwaffe began targeting shipping convoys and coastal ports. Aviation historian Robert Jackson pointed out that, quote, "The whole object of this exercise was to try to draw Fighter Command to battle and to inflict as much damage on Fighter Command before the main air offensive started as was possible to do." The Hurricanes were to face the bombers directly, as the faster Spitfires dealt with the impressive Messerschmitt 109s. The glamorous Spitfires became famous for their success in those dogfights, but the bombers posed the real threat to the nation, and it was the Hurricanes who held them. However, when forced to confront the intimidating Messerschmitts, faster and armed to the teeth, the Hurricanes were able to outmaneuver them. Commander Jeffrey Page explained, quote, "We, the Hurricane pilots, knew we could outturn the 109 by going around a smaller circle. If you both were turning, he was trying to shoot you down. Given a few turns, you were in a position to shoot at him." 4 weeks into the battle, the German forces had not been able to suppress the RAF as they expected, and the Luftwaffe had already lost 286 aircraft. Impatient, Hitler gave the order to launch the main offensive and harass the southern coast, neutralizing airfields and radar stations. The highly organized Germans overwhelmingly outnumbered the British, but the brave pilots found a way to break through the enemy lines. Attacking head-on in an almost suicidal way, the Hurricanes were eventually able to disassemble the neat German formations and turn back to engage individual aircraft. Furthermore, the Hurricane had an enormous capacity to absorb damage, and it was easily repaired and sent back into combat in a matter of minutes, as its fabric skin could be patched and doped, unlike the Spitfire's metal skin. Between August 13th and 31st, the Germans lost 435 aircraft to the RAF's 261. As the fighting progressed, the air crews were undermined, and on average, a British pilot would not live longer than 2 weeks. As new recruits were rushed into service, there was an abundance of Hurricanes, whose manufacturing process had proven extremely efficient. The pilots were then given an unexpected break from the relentless fighting on September 7th, while Hitler and his air chief, Hermann Göring, changed tactics and resolved to assault the British capital. Ironically, the Germans unwittingly allowed command bases on the southern coast to be restored. The new Nazi strategy called for a force of 350 aircraft to blow up London merely a week later. Pilot Officer Ray Holmes recalled, quote, "There was St. Paul's Cathedral, there's Buckingham Palace, and all these places, and he was on a dead straight line for all these places, and as far as I was concerned, he wasn't going to get there." Holmes had downed 2 aircraft, but noticed a third had eluded him. After exhausting his ammunition, he weaponized his entire Hurricane and chopped off the enemy's tail wing. On September 15th, there were about 56 enemy losses, with as much as 40 credited to Hurricanes. Then, barely 2 days later, the Germans realized that they could not invade Britain anytime soon, and postponed the campaign indefinitely. Unsung hero. The versatile aircraft would later be used for many roles. The Hurricane II-C night fighter was equipped with 4 20mm Hispano cannons and proved highly efficient against German bomber formations. Its relatively slower speed was compensated with smooth handling and sturdy construction, making it ideal for ground attack missions. Hurricane Mark II-Ds were equipped with twin 40mm Vickers cannons. This version was extremely lethal, especially during the Second Battle of El Alamein, where it claimed 39 tanks, over 200 vehicles, and 42 sets of artillery, becoming one of the first so-called tank busters. Additionally, the Hurricane was also deployed from merchant vessels using rocket power and short-launch platforms. The strategy was effective, but the pilots would have to bail out close to the home vessel and hope to be rescued. Hurricanes also saw service overseas during the 8 years of production. However, it was also flown by the enemy when it was captured or acquired during the occupation of friendly territories. Its production finally ended in 1944, with 14,487 examples delivered in total. The legendary aircraft would serve in every theater of World War II and played a crucial role in the Allied success and the course of world history. Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more exciting historical anecdotes.